Overcome by anger, the knight threw himself at the Seljuks after multiple civilians were shot around him. Within moments, his movement was slowed by arrows piercing his armor. Soon he was slashed by a blade in full sight of the rest of the knights, who continued to hold their shields up.
Oh my gosh, dude. Imagine all the arrows just piercing and just being launched all. Oh, I know he had so many arrows launched up in him. All right, continuation of the first Crusade series.
In our last episode on the First Crusade, we covered the successful siege of Nicaea, during which the collaboration of Latin and Byzantine armies, under the supervision of Alexios Komnenos, resulted in the first major victory for the Crusaders. The Seljuk Sultan Kilij Arslan lost his treasury, family, and capital.
Still waiting to see Alexios in action.
In the dangerous plains of Anatolia.
Still waiting to see the hype with this guy.
Dorylaeum in 1097.
You might be thinking, why didn't they just chill out and avoid all this general misery? Well, it's not that easy even today, but at least now you can take better control of your mental state using our sponsor, Endel. It's an app that provides personalized soundscapes to alter.
This is not even a good sponsor, a sponsor that's relevant to me.
Experiences with Endel, so check it out now.
Despite the fact that the Crusaders showed their martial prowess and personal courage during the siege of Nicaea, in the end it was cunning Byzantine diplomacy that won the day. The sack of the ancient city was prevented, the prisoners from the People's Crusade liberated, but the Romans now had to ensure the cohesion of their Latin mercenaries and prevent them from slaughtering the Turkish garrison. The Seljuk defenders were secretly ferried off to Pelicanum, where they met up with the emperor, who gave out gifts to everyone, with additional rewards for those who wished to defect to his side. Alexios spent a fortune ensuring that the interests of the Crusaders aligned with his own, but he simultaneously was sending out a strong message to the Turks that the Byzantines had little to do with the savage Franks, and that anyone who willingly surrendered to him would not only be spared, but generously rewarded.
Bro, nah, bro, this man Alexios is playing 4D chess. This man is playing 4D chess, bro. This man is a genius. This man is a diplomatic genius. I had someone in my previous comments point this out, and holy hell, this guy is just
As for the Crusaders
ahead of
themselves,
everyone.
Their leaders were given gold, jewels, silk cloaks, and horses, while wagons filled with bronze coins were distributed to the infantry and commoners. Despite that, tensions began to rise as the Latins became more suspicious of their generous host. Some were offended by the disparity in the rewards, while others were offended that rewards were given out in the first place, as this was supposed to be a religious movement motivated by faith, not possessions. And yet the biggest complaint came from the fact that only small groups were allowed in Nicaea to observe and pray in its churches.
Alexios, what are you cooking?
Alexios seized his opportunity to address the only major leader who didn't swear an oath to him, Bohemond's nephew, Tancred. The Norman once again refused and demanded for Alexios to accompany the Crusaders to their next target and to receive a royal tent identical to that of the emperor, proclaiming, "If you wish to dominate, then you must strive to serve." A brawl broke out, but eventually calmer minds prevailed, and Tancred swore the oath, kissed the emperor's hand, and received no gifts. Upon departure, he stared at Alexios and said, "I deem you worthy of being my enemy and not a friend." The council convened, and the Byzantines laid out a master plan to take over Anatolia. The next major target was naturally Antioch, but there were many smaller fortresses scattered throughout the harsh environment of the region that needed to be secured. Alexios put the imperial army and navy under the command of his brother-in-law, John Ducas, who was tasked with the recovery of the coastal provinces. Seljuk Chaka Bey, who ruled from Smyrna semi-independently from the Sultanate of Rum, still posed a significant threat with his navy, and would prevent any supplies reaching the Crusaders once they made it to Antioch. and while some Latins must have felt abandoned by the emperor, it made no sense for him to join the already giant host, only adding to the logistical issues. Not to mention the risks of Cuman invasions, rebellious generals, or death of the emperor. What if the new ruler wasn't so cooperative with the Crusaders? Once again, the Franks were to be escorted by the trusted general Tatikios, who was extremely loyal to Alexios, and as a Turk himself, he knew exactly what the steppe riders were capable of. Before departing, Alexios gave them plenty of supplies, as well as precious insight, advising them to send envoys to the Fatimid Caliphate and make an alliance with common enemies. And so, 10 days after Nicaea was taken, June 26, 1097, the Crusaders formed a massive column and set off. One of the leaders, Stefan of Blois, wrote back home to his wife, "I say to you, sweetheart, that from Nicaea we will arrive at Jerusalem in 5 weeks, provided that Antioch does not slow us down." Little did he know, the Franks would venture in the mountainous lands in the midst of the summer heat to face an enemy that vanquished tens of thousands of Romans. To reduce the load on the logistics, the coalition army split in two, with the first force moving ahead with Tatikios and Bohemond. The two imperial agents at the front, accompanied by the contingents of Tancred, Robert of Flanders, and Robert of Normandy, while Godfrey, Baldwin, Stefan, Hugh, and Raymond were 3 days' march behind them.
To get started in
It is very difficult to determine the Crusader force, as there were many non-combatants, many among them women and children. The First Army had around 3,000 knights and 10,000 footmen, which included 2,000 Byzantine infantry, accompanied by at least as many camp followers. The second force was at least twice as large, totaling around 4,500 mounted warriors and 20,000 infantry, with just as many non-combatants. Riders were constantly galloping between the two halves, ensuring a steady flow of information about the route they were taking. And while the vast column crawled towards the crucial site of Dorylaeum, the Seljuks observed their every move from the hilltops. The Seljuk Turks were not alone, as Kilij Arslan managed to convince his rival, the Turkic Danishmends, to put their differences aside and combine their armies for a total force between 10 and 15,000 steppe riders. They were equipped with leather armor and piercing swords, but the greatest tool in their arsenal was the recurve bow, with an effective range of 50 to 60 meters. Combined with their expert riding ability and knowledge of the terrain, this was the deadly combination that crushed the Byzantines in Manzikert, back when Romanos also decided to split his army in two halves. It is important to note that unlike many other nomadic peoples, the Seljuk Turks of Anatolia were stripped of a massive advantage due to the nature of the terrain. Despite controlling the region for over a decade, they couldn't raise enough horses to provide each of their riders with half a dozen remounts, meaning that they had to sacrifice in either speed or endurance. In the afternoon of the 30th of June, a few...
I would have said something there, but I already feel the need to say anything there because it's like, at this point, it's like, yeah, the Turks are absolutely OP with horse riding. But I will say this one thing. Okay, I guess I lied there. I will say this one thing. I mean, duh. The Turks are indigenous to this place anyways. Of course, they'll have a disadvantage. But unironically, I had people like... I wouldn't say like try to like say that Turks are like indigenous to Anatolia. But like... when I made that Turkic Century Reaction Part 1, and I said like I don't really call like that region Turkey because there's a whole bunch of actual indigenous groups that were there way before the Turks. And I don't know, I think that would be kind of a spit in the face to them, really and truly. And I had people look at me and tell me, oh, but if you control it, you could name it whatever you want. Sure. This really changed the fact that you're not native there. That's why I don't really call it Turkey, because calling the country Turkey is fine. But when you start calling the region Turkey, I'm like, yeah, no. I just call it Anatolia. I just call it Anatolia. Or Asia Minor in more rarer cases. Because but when you say Turkey as like the region, you're like saying like, oh, this is like the region of Turks, basically. And it's like, But yeah, I'm just saying that because, you know, what we just saw here completely really does show how the Turks were not used to this land. I mean, they were around for quite a long time, but again, they still weren't really used to it like they are on the steppe. Like, this place isn't the steppe anymore, right?
Seljuk scouts were spotted, and the Crusader vanguard made camp and sent a messenger to the Second Army, informing them to be on high alert before continuing their march the next morning, imagining themselves as a Roman legion. Weapons taken up, trumpets sounding, arranged against the enemy in wings, centurions leading cohorts and centuries, standing
Is this a quote or something?
in an orderly fashion, we began to set forth.
This is like a direct quote.
After crossing a small river, the army
He didn't
entered
even-
the junction of two
He didn't even say where the quote was from.
valleys, 45 kilometers from Dorylaeum. The open plain was wide enough for the Seljuk
Oh,
but also allowed them to catch the Crusaders by surprise. They
I was
couldn't
reading
have
the
picked
thing,
a
by the
better
way.
spot for an ambush.
if you
As soon as the
can't
Seljuk
clock
force
that.
was seen, Boemor ordered a camp to be constructed by the infantry, picking a spot close to the river, hoping that the marshy ground
Dorylaeum.
would give them protection on one flank. In order to buy them some
Dorylaeum,
time,
I
he
think.
and Robert of Normandy gathered the entire cavalry force of 3,000 knights and charged at Kilij Arslan. The fighting raged for almost an hour, but the light cavalry overwhelmed the Latin nobility, sending them back towards the makeshift camp, where some dug trenches, while the non-combatants and baggage train were directed towards the center. Hundreds of troops that were between the two Crusader armies poured into the battlefield, completely unaware of the ongoing battle, before they were captured or killed. Boemor and Robert ordered their entire force to dismount and positioned the heavily armored cavalrymen to hold the vanguard and withstand volley after volley. There were no walls, just a mass of people in chain armor in the summer heat, holding together against these circling nomads who tried to pick them off one at a time, screaming and taunting in the hope they would turn their back and flee. An eyewitness reports, they encircled us on all sides, engaging at close quarters and throwing darts and spears and firing arrows wondrously far and wide. They howled and shrieked and shouted, making a devilish noise in their high voices, crying and shouting.
Bro, dude. Honestly, these people have like more than balls of steel, because that's like peer pressure final boss. Like, imagine the amount of pressure that you're under, bro. Like, I have goosebumps literally just imagining being in their positions right now, just thinking about that. I'm thinking, like, what the hell would I do there? I mean, you can't even do nothing, but like some people would break under pressure, unironically. But the only thing that you really can do is just sit there and sit tight. But some people, just out of instinct or just pure fear, would unironically turn their backs and run.
One particular Frankish knight called Robert of Paris, with a notorious background, was one of the first casualties. Back at Constantinople, he mocked the emperor by sitting on his imperial seat. Instead of punishing him, Alexios invited him for a drink and explained they were allies, advising him to never chase their nomadic common enemy. Overcome by anger, the knight threw himself at the Seljuks after multiple civilians were shot around him. Within moments, his movement was slowed by arrows piercing his armor. Soon he was slashed by a blade in full sight of the rest of the knights, who continued to hold their shields up.
Oh my gosh, dude. Imagine all the arrows just piercing and just being launched all. Oh, I know he had so many arrows launched up in him. Oh my gosh. Also, this guy was kind of stupid. I ain't gonna lie to you. This guy was really stupid. Like, I mean, what Alexio say didn't even, I mean, Mance was right.
Bohemond and Robert were now screaming, ordering their men to hold the line, fully aware that if the lines broke, there would be nowhere to run.
We see.
At first, women constantly supplied the soldiers with buckets of water from the river, but as the hours dragged on, they also had the role of dragging the dead away from the front. Both duties were essential.
Holy, oh. Hey bro, shout out to the women. Shout out to the women, honestly. Shout out to the women. There's this misconception, right, that like a lot of women didn't do anything throughout history, but that's like very wrong. There are plenty of examples without the whole liberal BS nonsense where you could show how women were like very much useful throughout history. Bro, it reminds me of a story. I don't know if I should say the story, but yeah, I'm gonna save that for later.
To the survival of everyone inside the camp, but with each passing moment, hope was fading.
Bro, how many freaking arrows do these Turks even have, bro? Like,
while priests were praying for salvation, when suddenly Kilij Arslan gave the order to attack the camp from every direction, both on horse and on foot. Brutal hand-to-hand combat ensued.
I think he ran out.
Casualties, including Tancred's brother William. Charge after charge failed to break the Normans.
He's gone.
Then suddenly, a detachment appeared from the marsh and entered the camp, killing anyone in their path. A band of knights quickly rushed to close the gap and push them back, but the Christians were at the brink.
Oh no!
Cavalrymen appeared on the horizon.
Wait.
It had now been 5 hours since the first clash between the two armies, but after receiving word of the attack, Godfrey of Bouillon arrived at noon alongside 50 knights and bravely charged against the Seljuks, who halted their attack on the camp and turned on the reinforcements.
Bro, this is like the Rite of Rohan from Lord of the Rings. The Rite of Rohan. Bro, there's no freaking way, bro. No, Rite of Rohan. This has to be inspired. This battle definitely, Rite of Rohan, Lord of the Rings, was definitely inspired from this battle. There's no way, bro. This is, bro. If you don't know what a Lord of the Rings is, you live in a cave. I feel like everyone should know what Rite of the Rohan is from Lord of the Rings. There's no way this is not inspired from that.
Not long after, Raymond and Hugh joined the fight. And while Kilij Arslan still had the numerical advantage, the lack of remounts and length of the engagement meant that his army was extremely low on both energy and ammunition.
Yeah, they're exhausted now.
At this point, Tatikios and Bohemond switched from a defensive stance to an offensive one, and as the Crusader cavalry engaged for the Battle of Anatolia, another detachment was seen on top of a hill behind the Seljuk line. Bishop Ademar, who used local guides to outflank the enemy, gave a rousing speech as Provençal troops charged into the enemy camp, plundering the Sultan's tent before setting it all on fire and advancing on the enemy. With enemies on all sides, the Turkic army had no space to execute their masterful maneuvers and had no choice but to flee.
Yeah, the thing about the Turks is that they're too conservative. That's something that I've noticed.
Reinforcements arrived, and this victory sent ripples through the entire Muslim world. Ibn al-Qalanisi, an Arabic writer, noted, "When news was received of the shameful calamity to the cause of Islam, the anxiety of the people became acute, and their fear and alarm increased. 3,000 nomads perished in the battle.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
The Christians lost 4,000 of their own, who were celebrated as martyrs. The plunder of the camp resulted in numerous fine weapons, gold coins, jewels, horses and camels, not to mention much needed grain. Everyone involved played a crucial role, but the man who was celebrated the most was Bohemond of Taranto, who rallied...
Honestly, everyone was equally equally like
his men to stand their ground.
golden MVP.
It was his courage and leadership that prevented another Manzikert. It didn't take long before supernatural elements were infused into the events.
Of course.
Seljuk deserters swore that they had seen 2 horsemen with shimmering weapons and of wondrous appearance riding ahead of our army, menacing the enemy such that they allowed them no opportunity for fighting.
Cope. It's like that one ultra nationalist Turkish guy in my comments who spams me, who literally just can't accept the fact that I'm not a pure black person. I'm not even kidding. You could go read my comments, especially for my video that I dropped yesterday. Just read the comments. And bro, I don't know why. Why are Turkish people so like insecure? Like seriously, genuine question. Why are Turkish people so insecure, bro? Like,
chroniclers later wrote that God sent 3
wild
sons, George, Demetrius, and Theodore, traditionally connected with the Orthodox Church, to save the Crusaders from doom. When the army broke camp on July 4th, they observed that the road was littered with dead horses and Seljuks, which they took as evidence of the saints charging after the routed enemy. The further the army moved away from Constantinople, the more biblical elements were infused into their beliefs and actions, the boundaries between both worlds slowly evaporating. News quickly
I love
reached
those
Alexios,
flags, bro.
who immediately sent out his forces against Chaka. One army moved towards Abydos, while the main force marched up the Meander Valley. At the same time, the Byzantine navy sailed directly towards Smyrna, with Chaka's daughter on board as a gesture of good faith.
Bro, just say Imperial Roman Navy, because this is like the Roman Empire still. Byzantine is an inaccurate word to use, but whatever.
Unbeknownst to the Byzantines,
whatever.
Chaka had recently fled his capital to meet up with Kilij Arslan, who personally executed him because of a growing mistrust, further destabilizing Western Anatolia. As in every other
hell?
the Seljuks were a minority and couldn't hope to hold out, so they surrendered and a new governor was installed. As one of his first decisions, the new governor summoned a local nomad who was accused of a crime. Fearing for his own life, the desperate man grabbed a knife and stabbed the governor, which led to widespread violence as the sailors still stationed in the city massacred the local populace.
Oh my goodness. Oh.
Already moved on to his next target, the city of Ephesus. But when news arrived of what had just occurred at Smyrna, the Seljuks rode out and decided to meet the Romans in open battle. Both sides sustained heavy casualties, but eventually Ducas prevailed and took the city with no resistance. Leaderless, defeated, and surrounded by rebellious citizens, the Seljuks were fully aware of the severity of their situation, and city after city surrendered to Alexios. Sardis and Philadelphia quickly followed, but one particularly interesting case was that of Laodicea, where according to the Alexiad, Ducas accepted the surrender of the garrison and left it in the hands of the deserters. Based on this, we can conclude that he was short on men who could garrison the nearby fortresses, and that some nomads, including noble families, had adopted a sedentary lifestyle and chose to stay in their newfound homes and serve under Alexios.
Oh wow.
By the end of 1097, the emperor signed a truce with Kilij Arslan, having regained most of Anatolia, fulfilling the dream of his generation.
Yeah, but you need to get more, man.
Far from over,
you need to
and
get
it didn't take
more
long for the high morale of the Crusaders to evaporate as they made their way across the plateau. Tatikios led the crossing, which took place in mid-July, with temperatures reaching over 30 degrees Celsius. There were no major rivers, and to make matters worse, Kilij Arslan adopted a scorched earth policy, stripping the land of any supplies and burning down useful structures. A week into this tumultuous path, a stream was found, and thousands sprinted towards it. Many drank too much and suffocated, while others were trampled.
Oh wow!
Major
I was reading the thing.
Expedition were the horses, a symbol of status and one of the greatest strengths of the Latin army. Western horses were larger than their eastern counterparts and demanded between 30 to 40 liters of water per day. Thousands of pack animals and hunting dogs also died, which meant that the pace at which the army could move was further slowed down. This was the sacrifice the army had to make according to the Roman High Command, which decided to take the southern route instead of the usual one through Ankara, without even stopping at Amorium. The risky move tricked the Seljuks into thinking that the army was not heading towards Antioch and would divert back to the coast at any moment. Coupled with their recent victory, this meant that the Crusaders were unopposed and didn't have to worry about ambushes and hit-and-run tactics. By August, the coalition made it to Antioch in Pisidia and resupplied, but by this point, thousands of soldiers perished, the horses, mules, hunting dogs and falcons were lost, and 2 of the major leaders were on the brink of death. Rimor was severely ill and didn't expect to recover, while Godfrey was badly mauled by a bear in a recent hunt.
Oh, what the hell? Oh,
The next stop was Iconium, a formidable but abandoned fortress, in which the army was warmly welcomed by its Roman population. At Heraclea...
Yeah, that's what I'm like thinking. I'm like, bro, like, there's no freaking way. Like, the Roman Empire has been in Anatolia for so long at this point. I'm like, surely there's still Romans that are still there. Like it should not be this hard to take a lot of these cities. But the way how Kings and Generals is portraying it is like he's portraying it like if it's like super foreign places. I'm like, no way. Like, was it actually like that? Like, there's no freaking way.
There was finally a hint of resistance as the Turkic riders set an ambush, but after a short skirmish, they fled the battle. The impact of Dorylaeum was so severe that nobody dared to stand against the knights for long. Instead of making for Cilicia, the army moved north towards Caesarea, then took a month crossing the Taurus Mountains, where the temperatures would drop severely, testing the constitution of the Franks, who were used to a very different climate.
I feel that. Reminds me of when I first came to America, and it was in October. And we didn't know. We were so naive. 10 years ago. We're so naive. Not even 10, like, probably like 12, 13 years ago. I first came to the US in 2012, but I didn't like live there. It was 2015 where I finally came and settled down. And it was like, bro, we're so used to room temperature, bro. Except for in the summer, when it's like much more hotter. So when you came to freaking Florida, North Florida, more so specifically Jacksonville, we just kind of expected that it would be the same. Oh my goodness, dude. Ugh. I have never felt cold like that to this day. That level of cold. Like, I'm talking like when you're like fresh, like you never experienced like cold before. And even then, that wasn't even cold. It was probably like, I don't know, like 50, 40 degrees outside. I was wearing like short pants. Short freaking like extremely short basically summer pants outside. Ew. That's a whole new level of feeling that I can't even describe to you. Especially it's like losing your virginity for the first time. It's like you can't really describe it. How it's like for the first time. It's just something that is just different.
That many knights decided to sell their weapons and armor. Whether this was a good plan or not, it solidifies the idea that even at this point, the shots were called by Alexios and his generals. As the troops advanced, Tatikios and his men rushed forward and liberated any strongholds, urging the citizens to ready their goods for the oncoming Crusaders and not to stir any trouble. In the absence of Seljuk authority, Roman and Armenian governors shifted their allegiance towards Constantinople, a step which was essential in case the siege of Antioch was prolonged and supplies were needed to support it. In November 1097, Anselm of Ribemont writes that the army held 200 fortresses and cities, while Stefan of Blois' account mentions 165. it is safe to assume that most of Anatolia was reconquered for the Komnenian dynasty. In our next video, the Crusaders...
Alright, Crusaders swept the Turks. Ease, peas, lemon squeeze. Alright, we're getting to the good part. Look, man, if you're new to my channel and you made it all the way here and you let me reactions, go check out my other reactions. I have so much good reactions on my channel. Definitely go check it out, man. If you have any suggestions for me, to me, definitely go comment it down below. Beware, if you want me to do like a long video or like a long series, those reactions typically take longer because I need to make sure that sometimes I talk a lot in my reactions. If you've been watching me for a long time, you know this. So I usually wait until I have like a lot of time where I know that I'm not gonna be scrambling because I have things to do outside of YouTube, of course. Duh. Anyways, man, make sure you like the video so my stuff stays on the algorithm, man. Thank you for watching and goodbye.